Hello and welcome to my test taking skills PowerPoint. I use this in ACP 116, the very first class most of you took with me, and by request am posting this because this was basically initially preparation for the written examination for certification or licensure for NADAC or ICNRC. So your study process. Your brain is lazy. Your brain will remember things that it's exposed to 5 different times, which in my courses that have tests, that's why I force you into the material so many times, why I have mandatory attendance. So these exposures, it doesn't matter how you do it, but it matters that you do it. My suggestion, skim, highlight, and read your books. I've had students who decided to not read the books. It's not the best way to get a good grade, and it's not the best way to pass the examinations. Reread the highlights. The highlights should be things that you thought were important or confusing. Record verbally the material that you've highlighted. Listen to this recording. Listen to the recording, looking at the highlights at the same time if you possibly can. Why I found out this worked, and this is robbed from Where There's a Will, There's an A, that old series. I found out this worked when I ran out of time. When I first came back to school after being out for 17 years. And I ran out of time to study, but I had my notes on tapes. And I had a cassette player in the car, so I popped that into the cassette player in the car and would listen to them. I had a cassette player with headphones. I would listen to it around the house as I was doing stuff. And amazingly, it stuck. And I did better by listening to recordings and reading than any other study technique I'd used. Read with a purpose. Build this from the questions that you have, that you know about, that are in the text, that you've heard in other classes. Look at the goals that the text has. Look at the goals that the examination has. Look at old syllabi from classes for hints. Talk to people that have taken the examination that you're going to take or have taken the class that you're taking. Review. The most active step is reviewing and testing yourself. Never create a multiple choice test. You give yourself 4 answers and 3 of those are wrong. They're going to stick in your brain just like the right answer does. So it's a fill in the blank. If you're going to record and then pause to give yourself a chance to answer the question verbally and then read the right answer yourself, that will stick. But if you give yourself a list of wrong answers and you're listening to this recording as you're trying to study, all the wrong answers are going to stick in your head and you won't remember which is which. Essay tests will help you as prep, short answer essay, long answer essay, anything that gets you into the material. And again, 5 times. Your brain will remember things that you get into 5 times. Highlight. Write in your book. Don't use separate notebooks for note-taking in classes. This should be something where you're either typing it into a computer where it's searchable and you can find what you're looking for, or it's written in the book so you know that in Chapter 5 the professor was talking about DSM-5. Where's DSM-5 in Chapter 5? And there's your notes from the professor along with DSM-5. It's a way of annotating your text. When you're reading for speed, look at first and last sentences and paragraphs. First sentence is supposed to introduce the concept, the last sentence is supposed to wrap it up. If you don't understand those, then read what's in between. Look for things that are italicized, bolded, highlighted. They have bullet points, they have numbered lists. Those are things that the author thought were most important. Learn to circle and connect, and we'll show you a little bit about mind mapping in the next slide. But within the book itself, you should be making a mess of your book. You should circle and highlight concepts and connect them together. They're connected. It will make your studying go much faster. So what's a mind map look like? This is what a mind map looks like. You should be able to lay out an entire chapter or an entire concept on an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper. You should, if you understand it well, you should be able to lay it out doing some type of a short drawing. This is how I prepared for my doctoral comps. I did mind maps that were on poster board because they were entire courses that I was laying out. A timeline. For your studying, whatever it's for, licensure exam, certification exam, a class, you should have a timeline for your studying that starts right now, starts at the beginning. Spread out your studying. Spread it out reasonably and realistically. Don't overwhelm yourself. Study materials that you do not know well right before the test. Study them right before the test. That will stick the best. Skip materials that you know well. We like to calm ourselves down by studying things we know well. A lot of people in the certification or licensure exam will get themselves all bottled up into studying 12 steps, which they virtually have memorized after 2 years of working in a treatment center. Don't study things that you know. You don't have time for that. Find other ways to calm yourself. The week before a test, study your weakest test area that week. Give light review to the rest during one day you've set aside to cram. Cramming is a bad way to prepare, but it works to memorize material for the short term, 1 to 3 days before test. I say 2 on this slide. So there's middle term memory, and if you've crammed, you know this. It will last for a couple of days. So if you try to cram a week before a test, it won't work. It's got to be preceded by normal, regular, intense reading and study. The day before a test, the last 2 hours before you go to bed, review your worst area. We remember material best that we study right before we go to sleep. Studying it the whole day is not going to work. Studying the last couple of hours before you go to bed, the areas that are the worst, will help you get through them. Those notes you recorded, set up a player, turn it on, and have it running all night while you're in bed. The day of a test. Get away from the sugars, the carbs, get away from the junk food. Stick with good, lean proteins. Stay away from the caffeine. You don't want basically a drug-induced dip to happen right in the middle of the test. And dress comfortably. When I took the licensure exam, I'm dressed the way that I am now. Comfortable shirt, t-shirt. I brought a coat. It was a warm day, but I brought a coat anyway, a light coat. Jeans, sneakers, and went in. I saw guys in shirts with neckties and suits and dress shoes, women that were in high heels and dresses, and I thought, this is just crazy. This is just crazy making. If you're taking a cert licensure exam, it can be up to 3 hours. Dress comfortably. So multiple choice exams. Now assume that the certification licensure exam, if that's what you're preparing for, is a well-built exam. So make that assumption. So I'm going to talk about well-built and poorly built exams. So multiple choice exams are how you're measured, how your learning is measured in a lot of courses, and how we measure it for the certification and licensure exams. So I'm going to talk about what these exams will look like and how to work with both of them. So well-built multiple choice exam. The questions range from easy to difficult, or range from easiest question in the beginning to the most difficult at the end. This is done to build your confidence as you take the examination. The licensure and certification exam, they're randomized. So there's no, it starts with easy and goes to hardest. But in the classroom situation, it should start with easy and go to hardest. It's meant to build your confidence. Good exams cover material as in the textbook and or material which was discussed in the classroom. Again, if you're doing a licensure certification exam, your material is in that ready to test book that I've already put on the Facebook page. Good exams don't contain surprise questions. Good exams are designed for student success, not failure. They have the following choices for every question. There are 4 types of answers. The first one's an obviously wrong answer that anybody that knows anything about the topic would reject. The second one is wrong, and if you paid attention and if you skim through the text, you can reject that. The third one's a distractor that looks almost right, but isn't quite right, and the only way you can reject it is by knowing the material well. You'll notice I'm saying how to reject these answers. You are not Looking for the right answer, you are looking to get rid of wrong answers. This is how you play this game. You get rid of wrong answers. Then the last one is the correct answer. So what do you do with these? Well, in a classroom test, I get rid of questions which half the students don't answer correctly. I get rid of those. That won't happen in the Certificate Licensure exam. They think it belongs there, it's there. So you're going to have some tough questions on there. So again, how to deal with this. Category 1 answers, I know this answer. You mark it, you move on, and you keep going. Category 2, I have a good guess. Make sure you mark in the margin that this is a guess. Whether you use a dot, you use a line, you use an X, you use a question mark, make sure you mark it so you know what you're coming back to when you remember it. Do not spend a lot of time on these. Eliminate your wrong answers. Pick the one that's stickiest in your head. Again, the brain is lazy. The right answer is probably what's going to stick in your head. Take the answer that's the stickiest. That's probably the right answer. This is stuff you've heard before. Don't change it once you think you know it. The right answer is the one most likely to stick. But again, move on. Don't spend a lot of time on any of these question categories. You want to come back to them. You want to come back. Category 3, you don't have a clue. Again, different type of marking. Make sure you come back to it. You don't have a clue, skip it. Cross off the ones you're certain are wrong, and then skip them. Don't waste time on them because they'll take time away from Category 1 questions in particular that you can answer right. You'll get to the end of the test like, oh my God, I've got 15 minutes left and I've got 30 questions. That's how you get there. You waste your time on getting anxious over these Category 3 answers and these things that you don't know at all. They will waste time, they will increase your anxiety level, and they will decrease the right answers to questions that you know because of your anxiety ramping up. Mark them in the margin. Come back to them after you've completed the rest of the test. You might have a trigger within the other questions that will bring you to, oh my God, this is right. This is why you have it marked. It's like, oh my God, I know the answer to that question now. And then you go back through the test and you mark it. Even in the licensure exam. When I took it years ago now, they had one question was answered by another question. So the first one was, who created humanistic counseling theory? And then they gave a list of names. The person was Carl Rogers, and I knew that right away. About 40, 50 questions later, they had a question that started off with, Carl Rogers, the originator of humanistic theory, says the following items are important. They'd answered their own question. No matter how well built a test is, that can happen. Again, another reason for skipping those Category 3, I don't know questions and marking them in the margin. Eliminate stuff that you just don't know for sure, and then make your best guess, randomly choose between them. And not so randomly, I'll talk about that in a second. You have a 25% chance of getting the right answer. You have a 25% chance of getting the right answer. So, for example, I've answered 87% of the questions. The remaining 13% I have no clue. If I hit 25% of them correctly, I'll have a final score of 90.25 or an A rather than a B. Which grade would you rather have? Now, when you do this, you want to do something that comes from a badly built test. It's like you want to count up the numbers of A, B, C, and D's that were marked as the right answers, at least according to you. You want to use the one that's used the most and put those in your Category 3 questions if you have no clue. If you've eliminated a couple of them, then you want to use the one that's most occurring between those two. So poorly constructed. The questions are arranged from difficult to easy. Ignore questions you have difficulty with and move on. Seek questions you can answer confidently. Literally, I've told students sometimes the best thing to do is to start at the very last page of the test and go backwards. There's no rule that says you go from 1 to 100. It isn't any more effectual than going from 100 backwards to 1. Material in the exam was not in the textbook or material which was discussed in the classroom. If you're taking a class, this is the most horrible thing you can get into. You have got to know who your professor is before you take a class, and sometimes you don't have a choice. But talk to people, find out what the professor was like. Look at Rate My Professor, find out what your options are. Don't take a course just because it fits in the schedule. I remember doing that at Augie for my first time around through college. It just fit in the schedule. It was just an absolutely horrible experience. I knew nothing about the professor, and it was just a train wreck. Take it because you've actually talked to somebody that's taken that prof. If you're stuck in a course like this, you're going to have to read all the supplemental material, all the bibliography material, and it's going to be tough. And you can get stuck. You can be the only person that teaches a class that you've got to have. You don't have a choice of professor. Another thing that can be wrong with these, the exam contains surprise questions. Question was barely touched on. It's obscure. You've never heard of it. You're going to have to treat all the material in the lecture and the text as essential and do a lot of extra hours of studying. The exam's designed to weed out students. If you're stuck, again, read all the supplemental material, watch all the supplemental videos. There's no supplemental material when you have this in a course. The exam is constructed entirely of answers that all look right. There are more than one distractor answer, and I've had profs tell me the best test is one where it's 3 distractors and 1 right answer. No, it's not. The reason that it's not, if you were to go back a few minutes in this slide pack, I can tell by which answers you're picking how much time you've spent studying. So I want to know if you're picking distractors, then it's telling me that you need to just study a little bit more. If you're picking garbage answers, if you're picking bad answers, it's telling me you need to start studying. Or there may be something else that we need to look at. So stop looking at the instructor-generated list of answers if this is the case, and start covering them up with a piece of paper, with your hand, whatever you need to do. Generate what you think is the right answer in your head, and then mark the thing that matches that the most closely. People with test anxiety tell me that reading the question with the answers covered up reduces their anxiety dramatically. Patterns in the answers. I mentioned this before. We're human. Humans write these tests. So it's like, oh, A is my favorite thing, or B is my favorite thing, or C is my favorite thing. And you will notice when you go down the Scantron, it's like, my God, I've got a lot of C's marked. That's what you would want to answer to a question where you don't have any idea what the answer is. That would be your best, most rational guess. We'll just get in the mindset when we write these and make mistakes. Finally, stuff that's grammatically incorrect. This is stuff you know. The grammar doesn't match. It's plural going to singular, it's past tense going to present tense. Those are probably wrong. The longest answer is most likely to be the right one. Why? Again, because as we write these tests, we get lazy. We're not going to write a whole bunch of stuff for a wrong answer. Wrong answers are going to be shorter. Wrong answers are going to typically be shorter. Answer that says none of the above or all of the above. It is so much easier if you've ever written the test to write stuff where everything is wrong or where everything is right. It's much easier to write those questions, and we do it when we get lazy. A well-constructed test, the rules I just covered won't be very useful to you, but no test is perfect. Do's and don'ts the day before the exam. Do cram, but review the stuff that you don't know and take breaks between them. When you study, the longest period you should study is 30 minutes. We remember first and last's best. 15 minutes is more ideal. 15 or 20 minutes is more ideal than half an hour. But if you're going to sit and study for hours, your firsts and lasts, you're going to have a whole huge chunk in the middle of those 2 hours where you don't remember anything you studied. You remember the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes. I tell people, and I can't get them to do it, you should study in 15 to 20 minute increments. Half an hour is the absolute maximum. And then you take a break, and then you come back to it. It's more efficient to take a bunch of breaks and do a lot of short studying. Don't take a practice test the day before your exam. It will mess you up left and right. Take them the weeks before, take them a few days before, the day of, forget it. It's going to mess you up and make you anxious. Collect everything you need. Close, alarms that you need to set, pencils, everything, food, water, everything. The night before, try to rest. Again, I said 2 hours before you go to bed, study again. You need about 6 o'clock at night. It's like, this needs to be it. You need to take a break. Come back to it right before you go to bed. Stay away from the rotten, lousy foods. Set your alarm early. You want an extra half hour to an hour before a test. I've had so many people in the intro class that will arrive late because they just barely gave themselves enough time to drive from point A to point B and something went wrong. Go early. Don't create that anxiety on top of anxiety with, will I arrive in time? Will he let me take the test? Eat high protein foods the day you're taking the test. This is the day to try that out because the energy level will be more stable. Engage in your normal daily routines. Wear comfortable clothing. Your grade's not based on how you're dressed. We've talked about this before. Dress in layers so you can adapt to the room. I've had times where I've had a room on campus where it was perfectly fine the day before. The next day it's freezing in the room because the heat went out and we're still having class. Dress so you can adjust. Dress so you can adjust. Always dress in layers. Bring everything you need. Pencils, snacks. Again, arrive early. Think positively. Yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I will succeed. Don't let your anxiety get the better of you. Listen to the proctor and follow all the exam instructions. I've had people in the classroom write everything on the wrong side of the Scantron. Even though we have it turned face up the right way, they'll pick the other side. Then they have to go through and they have to redo everything. Pace yourself. Take your time. You don't get points for getting done early. If you're somebody with test anxiety, sit towards the front of the room because as the room empties out, you'll get more anxious typically. It's better to sit towards the front of the room so you don't see the room emptying out. You have whatever time limit you have for a test. In my classes, I tell people, I brought a book to read. I'm going to sit here until the last person's done. I don't care when that is. We leave when typical class time would be over. The licensure cert exam, they give you 3 hours. There's no reason to not take that time. Review these test taking skills before you take the exam. Make sure that you know them. Be alert to what the question's actually asking. If you read too fast, you try to get out fast, you might not even be answering the question that's asked. Make sure you read it slowly and that you're comprehending what's being asked of you. Mark every answer in its right space. Triple check that you put the stuff in the right spot. It is so easy to get off by one. Like if it's a Scantron, it's so easy to get one below it and then just keep going. You got everything wrong. Take your time and spot check. Like, okay, I'm going to check every 5th question, and then suddenly you see that they're all wrong. You probably marked them wrong. So be very cautious with that. Take your time. Review the answer sheet one last time. Don't try to beat other people. Don't change your answers. And the day after, relax. I think the cert exam now, it's like a couple of days before most folks know. I don't think that it's a terribly long amount of time anymore. But in the olden times, which I'm talking about here, it was 30 to 45 days of worrying about how the exam went. Worrying about how the exam went will not change how you did. Okay. Thank you and good luck.